latest arrival of Vietnamese refugees seeking sanctuary in Hong Kong. Nearly 120,000 others have preceded them since 1975. They have been warned, however, that if they put themselves in the care of the Hong Kong government, they will be taken to isolated, closed camps where they'll be cut off from the rest of the Hong Kong community. Their relief at having escaped from Vietnam and surviving the journey to the safety of Hong Kong shores far outweighs any anxiety about the closed camps. Besides, although they have been offered assistance to leave Hong Kong waters, there are no viable alternative destinations within their reach. And even the most resigned amongst them have no real idea what their new life will be like as detainees of the Hong Kong government, perhaps permanent ones.
Previously, from 1979 up to 1982, I think uniquely perhaps in this region, refugees who came here were landed in the heart of Hong Kong, were permitted to live in open centres, were permitted to go out and earn money, to take up open employment, live basically very unrestricted lives in the heart of a very large city. We stuck by this policy for 3 years in a way that other places were unable to do so. Indeed, many just accommodated refugees on the border. So, in 1982, we decided that this policy was sufficiently out of the general stream, if you like, in terms of refugee treatment, to be beginning to draw refugees here as an aim in itself, as a positive destination. So closed camps are essentially a withdrawal of the previous very liberal treatment, in as much as refugees are accommodated in camps but are not allowed to leave the camps and find outside employment. They live their daily lives in the camps.
This is the largest of the closed camps, Chi Ma Wan Refugee Detention Center on Lantau Island. Most of the 3,500 refugees here are illiterate peasants and fisherfolk, whereas in the early years of the influx, the majority who fled were from the educated middle classes. On arrival, the authorities first informed the newcomers of their rights by reading the official camp rules and regulations.
Listen to the officer. He wants to talk to you. He's going to hand out the camp rules. Take turns and read them carefully. Once you have read them, you must learn the rules. You must then try to remember what things you can or cannot do. You must not throw rubbish, or you will be punished. You are not allowed to receive cigarettes from outside. Opium is forbidden. Everything in this camp is government property. The beds, clothes and utensils all belong to the government. You must remember to look after them.
Almost all personal possessions are confiscated. Anything considered valuable by the camp authorities is loved to be returned only if and when the refugee leaves the camp. Absence of possessions argues the government removes any problems of stealing, property disputes or other sources of violence among the inmates. The search is a thorough one. Metal detectors seek out concealed gold or weapons. All clothes and possessions other than the few valuables will be destroyed. To the camp guards, they're worthless. But the refugees have saved them and carried them from their old life to the new, and they are their most treasured belongings. Not even their ancestral incense burners can be kept. Only photographs, without frames, are examined. Once their possessions have been disposed of, the processing of the refugees themselves begins. Everyone gets a haircut, regardless of the length and condition of their hair. Camp administrators justify this on the grounds of health and hygiene, even though standard medical opinion denies that it is necessary. The men find the haircut intolerable, the women find it humiliating and degrading. Long hair is a symbol of beauty and femininity in Vietnamese culture, and girls spend years growing and grooming it. In anticipation of the hairdresser's scissors, some women make futile attempts to conceal their hair beneath scarves or under their collars. Such attempts are doomed to failure, however, as no one is exempt.
Was your hair trimmed before? Yes, where I work. But I liked it long.
This is not like a prison haircut. It's a haircut to a level that is a reasonable guarantee that your hair will remain hygienic whether or not you choose to wash it. If you have, as we have in Chimalwan, 3,500 people living together in the space of a few hectares, it is for the sake of all that obviously certain minimal hygienic precautions are taken. What has been described, not by us, but by others, as the regimented nature of closed camps derives from the logical necessity of a decision to keep a large number of people in a restricted area.
It's beyond my expectation. It's beyond my imagination, really, that we have to flee a communist country to be detained later in what you call a concentration or closed camp or otherwise,
Can you see any reason for it?
Well, I may understand some reason, but a camp is a camp, and people in your camp are really detainees. You are treated as criminal, and it's beyond my imagination, really.
With the haircuts over, it is time for delousing. The chemical malathion is a strong one, painful when it gets as it invariably does in the children's eyes, which must then be repeatedly rinsed with water to relieve the burning. The chemical remains on the hair for 24 hours. The refugees are now ready to receive their new possessions, although it has been made clear that they must not be kept, only used. As government property, they must of course be signed for.
What's your name? Can you write? Sign here. Next.
Tiếp tục chị lên đi.
Mê lại đằng sau nữa.
Clothes are provided by charities, mainly through the Salvation Army. And although clean and serviceable, they bear little relation to the dark traditional dress of the Vietnamese. Older people are particularly ill at ease with the garish styles and colours.
This is a woman's blouse.
Áo đánh bà này.
Năm người một ghế,
11 hours after they last had food and water, they are offered a meal. It is their first taste of the unvarying, if adequate, diet, eaten with their borrowed utensils.
Đây là gì bên đây này? Đấy trông đẹp không? Nhìn em kìa, nhìn em.
Identity papers are drawn up, and the new arrivals are incorporated into the paperwork of the camp's administration. The newly registered families can now be given bunk space in which to spend the next 6 days while they are still in quarantine. Hong Kong's closed camps were introduced as a deliberate deterrent in an effort to stem the flow of refugees from Vietnam. Before this policy was introduced, Hong Kong had the most liberal and humane refugee policies in all of Asia. And in fact, some 14,000 refugees have been given permission to stay in Hong Kong permanently. But by 1982, over 100,000 boat people had fled to Hong Kong from Vietnam and were housed in open camps within her more densely populated areas. No new refugees are being sent to these camps now, and the numbers in them are slowly dwindling as the more fortunate ones leave to be resettled abroad. But some 8,000 refugees still live in these open centres, such as this one in Kowloon, many of them having been here for over 4 years. These refugees are allowed to find work and to shop outside the camps, which have become more closely integrated into the larger community. Small businesses and other enterprises have grown up, and each family shops, cooks and cares for itself. Everyone has their own possessions, freedom of personal appearance, and the right to a reasonably independent life. Life here is anything but easy, although help from charities organized by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees makes it more bearable. Here, the space allocated to each family is similar to that in Chima 1. But in these more open conditions, even a bunk can become a temporary home. In the past, the combination of freedom and private enterprise which exists within the open camps has led to some outbreaks of violence. These, however, and the general level of health and hygiene within the camps are certainly no worse than in many of the densely populated areas of Hong Kong. A more important fear is that tensions will mount between the Vietnamese refugees and their Chinese host population, especially when competing for jobs. Now, the Vietnamese refugees seldom get prestigious jobs like those in this factory, making very abundant dreams. More often they end up with jobs that the Hong Kong workers are reluctant to do. The accessibility of the open camps also improves the chances of charitable assistance and makes the possibility of resettlement in the West seem less of a dream. Most refugees believe that education, especially in English, is the key to resettlement opportunities. Accordingly, they send their children to English-speaking classes, some of which are run by missionary groups. The unpalatable truth is that even from the open camps, the chances of resettlement for most of them are poor. The majority of the refugees are uneducated and unskilled. These children may hope that they're closer to a resettled future, but their true prospects are bleak. The Vietnamese refugees are not the only people causing a problem for Hong Kong. For years now, Hong Kong has been the target for people trying to leave mainland China. And fear of being inundated by their Chinese neighbors has led to a rigid policy to prevent all illegal immigrants from entering Hong Kong territory. The land border is marked by an electrified fence. At sea, the Marine Police patrol the coastline day and night.
We're now going on a more or less westerly course towards China, and then we should be going northerly up into Deep Bay. We are nearly in Deep Bay now. You can see another of my patrol launches over there, just off the starboard bow. The hills in the distance there are China, of course. After that, then we should go as far up this bay as we can, which isn't very far because the waters are quite shallow. And then after that, we shall go on to smaller inflatable craft and patrol up in this area all night during the hours of darkness. The Chinese refugees from China, sometimes they swim, particularly in this area up here, Deep Bay. Sometimes by small sampan, by rowing or sometimes motorized, and sometimes by larger vessels. We apprehend them and then they are repatriated to China.
The task of the Marine Police is today made easier by the close cooperation of the Chinese authorities. All boats in the area may be stopped and searched by the Marine Police for illegal immigrants, and this is in fact an everyday occurrence. Night patrols are particularly vigilant.
This is a police inspection.
Nothing suspicious was found on this boat, and it was allowed to go on its way. About 20 illegal immigrants are captured each day, whether by sea or land. They are all sent to a detention center overnight and repatriated to China the next day. The policy is unbending. Not even those with close relatives in Hong Kong are allowed to remain. These people were caught during the last 24 hours. At 3 p.m. each day, in no man's land between Hong Kong and China, hidden away from the eyes of the public, the latest captives are handed over to the Chinese police. Back in China, some of them may be released quite quickly and may try their luck again. Resentments had developed in Hong Kong when the government seemed to be lax towards the Vietnamese but rigid towards the mainland Chinese. The new closed camp deterrent policy was aimed at reducing such resentments.
We have stuck by what I think was a general agreement in 1979 that countries in the region would provide temporary asylum and that places in the West would provide permanent homes, permanent resettlement for Vietnamese who insisted on leaving Vietnam and seeking asylum elsewhere. We haven't changed from that position. Unfortunately, during 1982, Western countries individually and as a process of continual trend have changed. During 1982, we had a review of our problems and of the fact that projecting the continual arrival rate year by year and the continually declining rate of departure, Hong Kong's refugee population on present trends was going to start to increase. Now, with no obvious end to the problem in sight, it is very difficult to explain in ordinary political terms how one is going to accept, as a crowded community, accepting ever greater numbers of refugees. So looking around our neighbours in the region and seeing the policies they'd adopted of, I think the fashionable phrase is humane deterrence, we adopted a policy that we felt remained humane in giving refugees asylum and in looking after their material needs, but made clear to them that, I'm afraid rather uncharitably, they were not welcome in Hong Kong as guests, that they would be given asylum for as long as they remained here, but that they could not be integrated into Hong Kong because of our other immigration problems, and that they were here awaiting resettlement elsewhere. That essentially was the reason for introducing closed camps when we did.
80-year-old Lung Nawin did not expect even to survive the journey to Hong Kong when he and his family fled Vietnam a year ago. He escaped with his son, daughter-in-law and grandchildren, but was unable to bring his wife with him.
I remember it well. We had only one chance to live, 90 to die. But we made it, and we are still alive. Only when we were at sea did I learn we had escaped from Vietnam. I'm old. I would like a place where I can be free for a few days. Then I'd be satisfied to die.
Duc Bai's wife is equally despondent. There's no food to cook, or clothes to sew, or home to care for. Apart from a little washing, she no longer has a proper role within the family, and little to distract her from thoughts of their uncertain future.
Those refugees who have relatives outside can receive clothes and sweets. I don't have relatives, so when my children ask, I have nothing to give. I have to hope every day that some country will take us. There is no future for my children here.
Some of the empty hours are filled with lessons. Teaching is provided by the refugees themselves, sometimes assisted by the Salvation Army, and classes for infants, children and adults are held simultaneously in the camp's largest hut. The lessons vary, but the most popular subject is English language. Like the inmates of the open camps, these refugees cling to the hope of resettlement in the United States, Australia, Canada or England, and believe that speaking English will increase their chances. But despite Duc Bai's efforts, his chances remain slim. He and many others have been in Chi Ma Wan for over a year without ever seeing an immigration officer from any country. The majority of those who have seen one have been rejected. None have any option but to sit and wait. Boredom hangs heavily over the camp. Once the lessons are over, there is little to pass the time, other than to sit watching the sea for new arrivals.
God, don't abandon me. Please don't abandon me. I'm like a fox, lying on the ground. I'm like a deer, lost in the jungle. Please don't dislike me. I'm not to blame. I've lived in darkness. I've lived in sin. But don't desert me. Don't abandon me. Please love me.
Nằm yên trong lòng đất.
The camp population is growing. The birth rate is more than double that of the rest of Hong Kong. In 1 week alone, 10 babies were born in Chi Ma Wan, and the maternity unit is seldom quiet. The new arrivals are unaware of their predicament, but their innocent presence underlines the almost hopeless situation of their parents. This middle-class family is one of the few likely to stand any chance of being accepted by Australian immigration officer David Hutchings.
Why has he applied to go to Australia? Why does he want to resettle in Australia?
Tại sao anh muốn xin đi Úc ở và muốn định cư tại Úc?
Vì tôi là không có thân nhân được Liên Hợp Quốc cho làm hồ sơ và tôi xin đi Úc vì Úc là một cái nơi mà một cái đất nước tự do và khí hậu thuận lợi giống Việt Nam. Vì vậy nên thì gia đình tôi muốn định cư ở Úc và ở một cái nước mà có tự do và nhân quyền.
It is because I have no relatives elsewhere, and the UNHCR submit the case for me to Australia.
Right.
And I know that I would like to live in a freedom country. Australia is a freedom country, and then the weather is the same as in Vietnam.
Is it? I see. Well, we won't include a geography lesson, but I appreciate what he said. Tell him I am going to do my very best to help him. I'm going to try and arrange what is called community sponsorship in Australia.
Refugees are very indomitable people, they're very determined, and they take great risks in leaving. And, you know, I admire them for it. Our problem is that we're caught in the middle, and while one admires them individually for taking these risks, it is very sad for us to see that having taken the risks, they found themselves absolutely nowhere because we cannot absorb them. We cannot offer them a permanent home in Hong Kong, and everywhere else seems, certainly in the West, seems to have taken the view that the problem is in some way solved. Whereas having been around our refugee camps, you know full well it isn't.
So certain is the government that the problem remains unsolved, that new camps are being prepared for several thousand more unwelcome arrivals. The deterrent policy is to continue, the new camps following the pattern of Chi Ma Wan. Prison-like in construction, they isolate the refugees on small islands around Hong Kong. The reasoning behind the government's decision is clear, but the effectiveness of closed camps has yet to be demonstrated. If they do not deter refugees and subsequently reduce the numbers arriving, then their sole effect is seriously to diminish the quality of life for people who have already suffered considerably. Certainly the boats keep coming, and many of those in them are fully aware of the closed camp policy even before they set out from Vietnam. This Hong Kong fishing boat saved 52 Vietnamese from almost certain drowning by rescuing them from their sinking vessel and bringing them to Hong Kong harbour to be processed by the police. These refugees knew before leaving Vietnam that they were destined for a closed camp.
I can speak English a little.
Speak English. Can you tell me where you have just come from?
We come from Vietnam, in QUÄC City.
How many days have you been on this boat?
We on the boat 6 days.
6 days?
Yes.
From Vietnam to here, 6 days?
4 days on the sea and 3 days on this ship.
What ship is this?
When we on the sea, we are lacking food and water, and we are almost die. So that we meet this ship and they take us.
How many of you?
We are 52 persons. 52 persons.
When you want to come to Hong Kong,
But before being taken to the camp on Lantau Island, the 52 newcomers are given a chance to leave Hong Kong and try their luck elsewhere. On a quarantine barge in Hong Kong harbour, with the city gleaming in the distance, they are told of the future awaiting them.
English or Vietnamese?
You need the teaching language.
An official notice is read out to them. It says, all former residents of Vietnam seeking to enter Hong Kong since the 2nd of July 1982 are detained in special centres. If you do not leave Hong Kong now, you will be taken to a closed centre and detained there indefinitely. You will not be permitted to leave detention during the time you remain in Hong Kong. It is extremely unlikely that any opportunity for resettlement will be forthcoming. You are free to leave Hong Kong now, and if you choose to continue your journey, you will be given assistance to do so. Still in a state of shock and exhaustion and with no alternative destination for transport, the refugees are then requested to state whether they will stay or go. They agree unanimously to remain in Hong Kong and wait patiently to be taken to China. Hong Kong's desperation to rid itself of the Vietnamese problem reflects a worldwide rejection of their plight. Some Asian countries are reluctant to take them in at all. Since the Vietnamese refugees dropped from the world headlines, Western countries have cut back drastically on the numbers they will accept, or are accepting none at all. Until they reverse this policy and allow more of the refugees to leave Hong Kong, the government there is faced with a growing political nightmare. Its attempts to deal with it leave thousands living in hopelessness. But the only real solution is outside their hands. The best hope for these refugee children's future lies not in the camp on Lantau Island, but with the rest of the world.
Sẽ nói sẽ cười sẽ vui nhiều hơn, đưa em vào gió sẽ trao cành hoa là sâu trồng lại cho em bông hoa lan vươn đầu về. Anh sẽ về anh ơi anh sẽ về, dù đêm không cùng hay mất thích.